Coming up on New Day at Arirang. North Korea fired multiple ballistic missiles into the EC early on Wednesday, marking a 17th show of force this year. The latest provocation also comes just after President Biden wrapped up his Asia tour. The Quad Summit wraps up in Tokyo on Tuesday, with leaders discussing a wide range of issues, including the Ukraine crisis and ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Samsung SDI and Stellantis have announced they are investing $2.5 billion in a joint venture for a lithium-ion battery production plant in the U.S. state of Indiana. The plant is set to open in 2025 and will create 1,500 new jobs.
Hello and welcome to New Day at Arirang. It's Wednesday, May 25th, 8 a.m. here in Seoul, South Korea. I'm Oh Seung.
And I'm Yusung Jed. Thanks for joining us this morning, because over the next hour, we'll be giving you a look into some of the biggest headlines of the day and experts' insights on key issues facing Korea and the rest of the world. Our top story this morning, North Korea fired 3 ballistic missiles on Wednesday morning, less than a day after U.S. President Joe Biden left Japan following his summits in Seoul and Tokyo. Now, Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff told reporters that the missiles were shot towards the EC, with the first fired at 6 a.m., followed by 2 more projectiles at around 6:40.
The types of missiles have not yet been identified, and the South Korean military is in the stage of verifying the distances and trajectories. President Yoon Suk-yeol convened his first National Security Council meeting to assess and address Pyongyang's second provocation since the South Korean leader took office. Seoul and Washington officials for weeks have warned that Pyongyang might launch a major provocation before or during US President Biden's 5-day stay in Seoul and Tokyo. The North's launch comes less than 24 hours after the American leader departed from the region. Quad leaders met in Tokyo. They discussed a wide range of issues, including the Ukraine crisis and ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Kim Dami starts us off.
The leaders of the United States, Australia, India, and Japan on Tuesday reaffirmed their shared goal of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. As part of the Quad's second meeting in 8 months, the Ukraine crisis topped the agenda in Tokyo. All 4 sides stressed that such a forceful act will not be tolerated in the Indo-Pacific region.
We cannot let the same thing happen in the Indo-Pacific region. Under such difficult conditions, we need to be united and show solidarity among the 4 countries.
Australia's new Prime Minister Anthony Albanese noted his new government's priorities align with the Quad agenda, which the U.S. President Joe Biden underlined as not just a passing fad.
The fact of the matter is that we have a lot of work to do, keeping this region peaceful and stable, tackling this pandemic and the next one, and addressing the climate crisis as referenced by our new colleague.
The latest agreement also covered a new joint response plan, which will include an information sharing system to deter China's illegal fishing in the region. The Quad leaders have further agreed to invest more than $50 billion in infrastructure in the region over the next 5 years and support the developing countries facing debt problems, also a move aimed at keeping Beijing's growing power in check. They discussed North Korea's recent flurry of military activities and agreed to cooperate for the regime's complete denuclearization. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
6 foreign warplanes briefly entered South Korea's air defense zone without notice on Tuesday, but they did not enter the country's airspace. 2 Chinese warplanes flew into the KADIZ at about 8 a.m. and stayed inside for about an hour and a half before moving away. About 2 hours later, 4 Russian military aircraft crossed into the zone before flying away about 15 minutes later. In response, Seoul's military reportedly deployed F-15K and KF-16 fighter jets to the area. This appears to have happened while Beijing and Moscow held their first joint drills since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, at a time when US President Joe Biden is in the middle of his Asia tour. South Korean battery maker Samsung SDI has unveiled plans to build a plant in the US with Stellantis NV. The joint venture will build an electric vehicle battery plant in the city of Kokomo, Indiana, with construction set to begin sometime this year. The facility will supply battery modules for vehicles produced at Stellantis North American assembly plants. The target for beginning operations is the first quarter of 2025 at an annual production capacity of 23 gigawatt hours, with an aim to increase to 33 gigawatt hours in the future. The companies will initially invest a combined $2.5 billion. Stellantis said Tuesday that the new plant will create 1,400 new jobs.
Now, Samsung Electronics is investing heavily over the next 5 years to expand its businesses with strong future growth. Hyundai also announced similar plans. Now, their goal is to create a domestic hub for next-gen businesses. Ji-young tells us more.
South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has announced hundreds of billions of dollars of new investment over the next 5 years in areas that promise strong future growth. Samsung said Tuesday that it's going to invest 450 trillion won, which is more than 350 billion US dollars, in profitable industries including semiconductors and bioscience. This new 5-year investment plan is an increase of 40% from the last one. It said roughly 80% of the money will be spent in Korea on R&D and new facilities. The firm said that if Samsung's foundry business were to become the world's #1 player, it would have an economic effect on the scale of creating a conglomerate even bigger than Samsung Electronics. Samsung Electronics currently ranks second in the foundry business after Taiwan's TSMC. Also, the company added it plans to hire 80,000 new employees and sees the investment leading to the creation of more than 1 million jobs more broadly. Samsung also plans to make new investments overseas.
Samsung became the first international company to make semiconductors in the United States. We highly value our friendship and look forward to continuing our special relationship.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Hyundai Motor Group also said by 2025, it'll invest nearly $50 billion to create a domestic hub for its next-generation businesses. The auto giant plans to spend some $13 billion to secure a global competitive edge in electric and eco-friendly cars. Also, for the development of robotics, urban air mobility, and artificial intelligence, the company has allocated roughly $7 billion. An expert says the government should ease regulations for the investments to come to fruition.
There have been a lot of regulations and restrictions that's going to be hampering, investment in Korea. So, in order for that investment plan to be coming to fruition, I think the government has to take a lot of dramatic measures in deregulations and innovative reformation in government policy.
Ji-young, Arirang News.
Now, business sentiment among South Korean companies remained flat in the month of May. The Bank of Korea says the business sentiment index for all industries for this month stands at 86 points, the same as April. Now, reading below 100 means pessimists about the economy outnumber optimists. Among manufacturing companies, the index is down by 1 point at 86. The central bank attributed the drop to the rise in commodity prices and China's lockdown. Meanwhile, for non-manufacturing businesses, the index was up 1 point, also at 86. It hit its highest figure in more than 11 years with the lifting of social distancing measures. Now, India has imposed restrictions on sugar exports to keep domestic prices under control. That's according to the Indian Food Ministry on Tuesday. The country will cap sugar exports at 10 million metric tons from June through September, marking the first time in 6 years that such measures have been imposed. Now, earlier this month, India curbed exports of wheat amid a surge in domestic prices. India is the world's second biggest exporter of sugar after Brazil. Lower sugar output in Brazil and high oil prices that encourage mills there to produce more sugarcane-based ethanol have raised global sugar prices. And the crisis in Ukraine also contributed to the global price rise. Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. Now, some countries that saw a huge decline in the number of COVID-19 infections are seeing another resurgence in daily COVID-19 cases again, the U.S. being one of those countries.
So what went wrong in those countries, and could this be a premonition of what's to come for other countries moving forward? For this, we connect with Ben Cowling, Chair Professor of Epidemiology at the University of Hong Kong. Very good morning to you, Professor. Now, first off, let's go to the US. The country is seeing a massive resurgence in cases, and although the actual figure could be higher considering much less testing is being done, what do you think is behind this resurgence, and what do you think went wrong?
Well, they had a lot of BA1 a few months ago, and now they're dealing with Omicron BA2.12.1, which is a little bit different. And so there's people in the US who maybe don't have immunity to this particular strain. But while the cases are going up a lot, the severe cases, the cases of severe COVID, are not actually going up that much, which is very reassuring. That's because of the immunity that's been built up from the high vaccine coverage and also the high number of prior infections, unfortunately. So it is not so much of a concern anymore. And I think this is what the situation will be like going forward, that we'll have infections in different places at different times, but there won't be so many severe cases anymore.
I want to kind of take a look at a report that came out recently. If you look at, for example, New York City, right? It's one of the U.S. cities that's seeing a high number of cases popping up again. Still, New York City Mayor Eric Adams saying that he won't be reimposing mask mandates. Now, there are people who say masks are pretty much useless against the Omicron variants. What's your assessment on masks against the Omicron variant?
Well, Omicron is highly transmissible. Masks certainly do work, but they're not perfect. They can reduce the transmission to a certain extent, not by a lot. So around the world in the last 2 years, a lot of places have had mask mandates. But now that countries are aiming to go more towards normal, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a recommendation that people consider wearing masks, but no longer to make it a mandate. It's not always easy to force people to do things that they don't want to do. And I think you have to use that power sparingly. So it does make sense to me that they're not bringing back the mask mandate, but the recommendation is still there, of course, and people can wear masks if they want to.
And Professor, a bit concerning news really. World Health Organization panel assessed that the world's governments are no better prepared to address the pandemic now than they were back in 2020. So what really are the issues and what needs to be done?
Well, I think right now and for the next 12 months or maybe the next 2 years, it's a really good opportunity to look back at the experiences from the COVID pandemic and update the pandemic plans for the next time round based on the experience gained during the COVID pandemic. Health departments have been too busy in the last 2 years to think about the future, but now is a really good time to reflect and then to make better plans so that we can respond better the next time there's a pandemic, whether it's coronavirus again, influenza, or something else.
Professor, we also want to kind of get your take on North Korea as well. They refused any help from the very start of the pandemic, though we don't have the actual figures. Still skeptical that the numbers that they're giving us is actually real. But I'm sure North Korea must have one of the lowest vaccination rates in the world. Not to mention, we're now seeing reports that there are massive spreads amongst its military, which could be concerning for them. Is it too late for them, or should they still try to vaccinate as many people as possible?
It's never too late because we know vaccines can have an effect almost immediately. Even the first dose can have an effect almost immediately. But it is getting towards the point when it's going to be too late because we know how fast Omicron spreads. Their peak must be approaching if it's not already here. And so that means that really the pressure on their healthcare system is going to be phenomenal at present and in the coming few weeks. It's really an unfortunate situation because vaccines have been available around the world for more than a year now. And we know that's critical to protecting older people against severe COVID.
And we're getting so many different subvariants of Omicron. Why is it evolving so quickly? And is this the future that we're going to be seeing continuously now?
Well, that's a good question. It's not clear what exactly is going on because the virus does seem to be evolving faster than expected. In general, coronaviruses do not evolve that fast, but COVID has been changing quite rapidly. With Omicron, there's been a lot of infections around the world, and when the virus has more opportunities to make small changes, that's when it might be able to make those small changes and then find ways to escape the immunity that's been building up in populations. But that's really an active area of research for many people around the world, trying to figure out what's been happening with Omicron and what might be going to happen in the future. How much further could the virus evolve? Will it continue to evolve this fast and so on? So let's really keep a close eye on that.
Because the other big question is, of course, what comes potentially after the Omicron variant as well, right? Well, thank you, Professor, for your insights this morning. Looking forward to speaking to you again next week.
Thank you.
And that wraps up the first half of New Day at Arirang.
But stick around, we have more coming your way in the second half, so we'll be back in just a moment.
Share South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduce a Korean survivor of Japan's wartime slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
넌 볼 수 없고 가질 수 없어 뚝뚝 힘을 쏟아내도 뜨거운 자태 한번 비추지 않고 내게만 가치란 그녀는 유명한 서울의 별 다 어딨나 In your eye 걔와 함께면 넌 디스토피아 내 발걸음 따라오면 유토피아 나의
I feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Forever.
Now, welcome back. We begin the second half of New Day at Arirang with tragic news from the United States. 14 students and 1 teacher have been killed after a gunman opened fire at an elementary school in South Texas on Tuesday local time.
Reports say 13 children were taken to hospital with injuries, while a 66-year-old woman was said to be in a critical condition. According to Texas Governor Greg Abbott, the suspect was identified as an 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, who reportedly also shot his grandmother before going to the elementary school. The governor added that the gunman was killed by a law enforcement dispatched to the scene. He also said that 2 officers sustained minor injuries. Authorities have said that the suspect carried out the attack alone. As monkeypox continues to spread in Europe, Germany's health authority recommended a 21-day isolation period for those infected. However, he added that the spread does not constitute the beginning of another pandemic. As of Tuesday morning, 5 cases have been reported in Germany. Also on Tuesday, the United Kingdom reported 14 new cases, raising the country's total count to 71, while the Czech Republic and Slovenia reported their first cases. The United Arab Emirates became the first Gulf state to confirm a case on the same day.
Now, more than 100 cases of monkeypox have been confirmed in 16 countries outside Africa. South Korean authorities are closely monitoring the situation. Travelers arriving from countries with confirmed cases are required to report any symptoms. Choi Min-jung brings us the updates.
South Korean health authorities are strengthening measures to prevent an inflow of the monkeypox virus from overseas.
Human-to-human transmission appears to be rare for monkeypox, but we should not rule out the possibility of it being imported from overseas as more people travel. And we also have to take the 21-day incubation period into consideration.
There are no cases confirmed in the country as of Tuesday, but authorities have vowed to keep close watch on what's happening overseas. They have also asked citizens to refrain from coming into close contact with wild animals and to be cautious when traveling to countries with confirmed cases. Inbound travelers arriving from those countries, including the United States and nations in Europe, must report to a quarantine officer if they have certain symptoms such as a rash or fever. People are also required to call the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency call center 1339 if they develop such symptoms within 3 weeks of arriving in Korea. The KDCA says it had already established a testing system for monkeypox back in 2016, with PCR tests as its main method. To prepare for a potential outbreak in Korea, the agency says it plans to find ways to expand testing across the country.
The spread of monkeypox is emerging as a global health issue, but South Korea established a diagnostic system early on and is prepared with countermeasures.
Authorities and experts also say that people should remain vigilant but shouldn't be overly concerned.
Unlike COVID-19, monkeypox transmission is not airborne, but instead, people can become infected if they come into close contact with a confirmed case. So I think the chances of the virus becoming widespread are low. But we still have to monitor the situation closely, as the virus could be in the country already.
The expert added that the best way to prevent a potential spread in the country would be to wear masks and frequently wash hands. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has been re-elected head of the World Health Organization on Tuesday, setting him up for another 5-year term as Director General of the global health body. Now, he was re-elected for his second term in a secret ballot after running unopposed. And in an unusual move, his home country, Ethiopia, did not back his candidacy. Although the WHO, under his leadership, have often been criticized for a slow response to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has also been praised for a greater equality in access to medicines and tools to combat the pandemic. Now, Tedros will lead the WHO until 2027. Under current rules, a Director General can only be re-elected once.
It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. After months of anticipation, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework was launched by 13 countries, including the United States, South Korea, Japan and others in the region, via a virtual rollout event. Representing 40% of the world's GDP, the US-driven deal aims to bring countries together on securing supply chains and enabling connected, resilient, clean and fair economies through common standards based on shared values. The deal was designed from the initial stages to bring the US back into the Indo-Pacific economy after former President Donald Trump walked out of the then Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's also seen by some as a way for Washington to rally its allies economically amid its ongoing rivalry with China. Now we discuss what the deal looks like as of now and how it will shape up in the weeks and months to come. For this, we're joined by Song Soo-young, Professor of Business and Economics at Chungang University in Seoul, and Sayuri Shirai, Professor of Policy Management at Keio University. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And, well, a lot of ground to cover, so let's start right away with you, Professor Song. Now, the joint declaration of the IPEF launch, it kind of failed to clarify a lot of vagueness that was criticised by many observers, because this initial deal, it failed to provide any details as to what kind of market access or tariff reductions there would be, along with other provisions. And while addressing skepticism around the IPEF, US Trade Secretary Gina Raimondo said that there would be firm commitments and signed agreements sometime in the future. But do you think, Professor, this is going to be easy to achieve for these 13 economies?
Yeah, well, good morning to you all. And as is said earlier, that actually the four policy pillars which was proposed under the government statement, announcement, declaration, it is quite vague. So the four pillars are consisted with a connected economy, resilient economy, and the clean economy and the fair economy. And the first pillar is under the leadership by the USTR, Trade Representative, but the other three is under the guidance of the Department of Commerce. Therefore, it means that the country, currently the 12 countries who would like to participate in each different pillar, and then they continue or they are conducting some kind of a ministerial negotiation for the to participate in the IPEF. In contrast, this could be quite in contrast with the RCEP, which was led by China. The difference is quite clear that the membership countries, RCEP include Laos and Myanmar and Cambodia, and those countries are actually has some problem of the domestic political situation. So that's why this IPEF, for the U.S., the purpose is to contain China from participating in this kind of the economic framework. Then the U.S. decided to not to be engaged with the Myanmar or Cambodia and the Laos, those countries. So the issue is RCEP is clearly the free trade agreement. The agenda is very clear, and reduction of tariff and foster and facilitate a free trade among the member countries within. But IPEF, there is no such commitment, even though as the anchor has mentioned, the Raymond, U.S. Trade Secretary, she is going to make a commitment, and they are going to make a signature and the negotiation among the member countries. But it is we have to see what it will be going on, and because of particularly the digital issues are not addressed, but it is included in the different policy pillars. So we have to see what is the specifics will be disclosed for the upcoming future.
Yes, still a lot of questions around what this still really is all about. And Professor Shirai, now the IPEF is supposed to be America's door back into the regional economy after former President Trump pulled out of the TPP, and also to provide some kind of counterbalance against China's own regional economic network. But right now, with a lack of details and enthusiasm from some member countries, do you think that IPEF is going to work towards America's advantage? Or like what some are saying, do you think the US will still have to join the CPTPP?
So I think President Biden knows that U.S. Congress is not going to pass any free trade agreement such as CPTPP because cutting tariff or cutting non-tariff barriers that might lead to the loss of American jobs. And then midterm election is coming in November, and it's not right time to discuss about it. And so, and also China is already applying for the membership of CPTPP, so it's going to be very complicated. So rather than sticking to the possible participation in a CPTPP, Biden decided to create a completely new framework of corporations as a starting point. And then at this moment, I don't see any clear binding agreement among these members, and it may take a lot of time to do that. But I think as a starting point, showing some signal to China and other country, maybe a good starting point, step. Yeah.
And Professor Song, now IPEF has it's failed to deliver any kind of concrete details on what kind of benefits it's going to offer its members. And many were hoping that it would be tariff reductions or greater access to the US market. And well, for South Korea, separate from IPEF, it's been hoping to have some quotas on its steel products removed by the US. They were put under a 70% quota by the US back in 2018. So do you see any positive developments towards that? Or what do you think is really going on?
It's hope. Yeah, we could make a hope, but it's quite big. Considering the situation in as for the steel products related issues, actually in 2021, the U.S. government has lifted some kind of disputes between U.S. and Europe, and then. As early as 2022, such as prominent economists and Kruger criticized the Biden administration not to participate in the CPTPP because Biden, during the presidential election, he has made an appointment and promised to reverse the Trump administration's and the Trump's agenda issues, but actually. Currently, the Biden administration just follow the Trumpian sanctions against around the world. So IPEF is a new exit because without any agreement, as the Professor Shirai has mentioned, that because the Congress clearly object the free trade or the reduction of tariff because of they faced some midterm election for the Congress. So therefore, it is quite difficult for the Biden administration to initiate the reversal of Trumpian administration sanctions. So to that regard, the 70% quota is we can hope hopefully we could get some mercy from the U.S. government, but it's quite difficult because this is related to the issues must get some approval from the Congress. So that is also affected by some political issues, domestic U.S. domestic political issues. So it's quite unlikely, I think.
Sure. So a very politically sensitive time for Mr. Biden. And well, Professor Shirai, now, before President Biden headed to Tokyo, there was the South Korea-US joint, the South Korean-US summit. And, well, the joint statement out of that meeting, it emphasized the importance of trilateral efforts for economic security. And this, of course, involves Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington. So how do you think we can really make good progress on that cooperation and really overcome the 2019 bilateral trade rift as well?
Yes, so this trilateral relationship is very crucial for us, but I think there is some perception gap as for this export restriction by Japan to Korea on semiconductor in 2019, because I think Korea understood that this Japan's action is a sort of retaliation to Korean Supreme Court decision about requiring Japanese company to pay compensation. But in the case of Japan, the Japanese government say this decision was made purely in terms of security, WTO related concerns, sort of related to North Korea. So within Japan, there's no discussion about linking these two issues, but Korea take it in this way. So under this situation, how to create some kind of negotiation or compromise is quite complicated. But at least I think Japanese government and then Korean government want to move a step forward on this. So I hope there will be some negotiation starting on this issue.
Well, we've certainly seen some very positive developments on that front, with the new Yoon government showing a lot of optimism towards really mending ties with Tokyo. And, well, Professor Song, do you think there's going to be any movement at all on forging the semiconductor alliance, or the Fab 4 or Chip 4, whatever the US is calling it, in the near future?
Yeah, as for the this morning, I would like to mention that Prime Minister of Singapore has mentioned that this IPEF should not be a NATO equivalent in East Asia, in Asia. So clearly speaking, the supply chain and the semiconductor issues are quite important for U.S. But we have to take into account, as Professor Shirai has mentioned, the conflict between the Korea and Japan in 2019 because of the Japan has banned the export of the very important, critical, essential materials for Korea for the production of the semiconductors. So still we have those hurdles we should overcome, and in terms of in the context of the historical background and the upcoming issues, it's a quite daunting job. And then we should, in order to make the IPEF to be a successful framework that helps facilitate economic alliance and stability of the supply chain and the semiconductor, then the political issue or the military issue should be excluded. Otherwise, it's quite maybe provocative. Even the Chinese government currently very worried of the IPEF, and they has blamed the IPEF as the equivalent to NATO in East Asia. So to that regard, we may say that we have to say that the IPEF, in order to make sure that the peaceful and the stable economic cooperation within the region, including the U.S., the firm commitment for some peaceful process among the countries, and very progressive attitude to overcome the hurdles, that is quite necessary. So then we can say the cooperation and some smooth supply chain of semiconductor and the fabulous for whatever it is, fabrication of the semiconductor production facilities.
Right, so it looks like the leaders, they really need to show agility and also finesse in really narrowing down the scope of what they can agree on and move forward on, and see progress on that. But Professor Shirai, now before we go, what is your outlook on the semiconductor alliance that the US is, it seems very eager to forge between the four countries, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and of course the United States?
Yes, so all four countries are producing semiconductor chips, but different types. And I think if we can, diversify this supply chain related to semiconductor, it's very important. But at this moment, these, initiatives are quite fragmented. Like Taiwan was not able to participate in IPEF, right? And then so at this moment, Korea is going to, have a factory in United States. Taiwan is going to have a factory in Japan or United States. But I'm just wondering if we can discuss, any more, cooperation beyond this. So it's not clear at this moment.
Right. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But perhaps the IPEF still does need to become a little more specific in order to do that. But of course, we have weeks to see that, according to the US Commerce Secretary. Now, well, this is where we'll have to finish the interview today. But that was Hong Soo-young, Professor of Business and Economics at Chungang University in Seoul, and Tae-Ri Shirai, Professor of Policy Management at Keio University. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, online learning became the norm during the pandemic, and that includes foreign students learning the Korean language. But now, many of the institutes in the country that offer Korean language courses are planning to resume in-person classes starting this summer. Our Lee Dae-hyun went to one of them and files this report.
Students at schools and universities are back in the classroom after over 2 years of online learning due to the pandemic. And starting this summer, foreign students at Korean language institutes will be as well.
I prefer going for learning a new language to go to offline classes because it's easier to discuss and have conversation and have dialogue, so I prefer that.
I'm pretty excited. It's really nice to get to finally meet my teachers too. I only saw their face for about a year on the screen, so it is really nice to actually get to talk to them in person. It's much more comfortable.
Korean language institutes are for foreigners who want to learn Korean and are put into classes based on their level. During the pandemic, these educational institutes had to run classes online, but this caused some problems, including student participation. According to a survey conducted by Yonsei Korean Language Institute, over 65% of the students who responded said that it's hard to concentrate in an online class. 64% of the students said lack of communication between students and their teachers is another issue. But now institutes are beginning to welcome students back to the classrooms. This is one of Korean Language Studies institutes located in Seoul. It has been offering online and in-person courses starting this year and is planning to increase the number of in-person classes this semester. A Korean language teacher of more than 7 years welcomes this new policy.
Online classes have caused some communication issues in learning a new language. But with in-person classes resuming, more students are starting to register for Korean courses.
She also added new trends are coming up in Korean language classes.
As more Korean language learners are planning to settle in Korea, they're getting more interested in learning about Korean culture. More than just food, they want to know about people's values and history. I'm putting more emphasis on teaching these things to my students.
She also emphasized that teachers should be more conscious of trendy buzzwords that are not in textbooks so that students can not only learn the language itself, but speak like a native Korean would. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Now, also, the Korean culture wave continues to expand with icons such as BTS and Squid Game leading the charge. And with more focus on the country, more people are eager to learn the Korean language, but learners are faced with the challenge of evolving language and less formal usage. Our Song Yoo-jin examines one of the barriers to Korean language acquisition.
The demand for learning Korean is booming across the world. The number of King Sejong Institute branches globally where Korean is taught jumped 18-fold from 13 in 2007 to 234 in 2021. But to really pick up a language, it's crucial to learn words used in casual conversations. And in Korean, portmanteaus are an example of such words. Portmanteaus blend two words into one to create a new word, such as brunch, which combines breakfast and lunch.
I use a lot of portmanteau words when I speak with my friends at school. We usually learn them from social media, YouTube, or celebrities.
An example of a Korean portmanteau is chimek, which refers to having fried chicken and beer. It's a combination of the words chicken and 맥주, meaning beer. Another is mukbang, or live stream eating show, which blends 먹는 for eating and 방송 for broadcast. So why have these words become so popular in Korea?
Koreans are all about efficiency and speed, so they started shortening and combining words for efficiency. Then the emergence of social media and messenger apps spread these words quickly to the public.
Portmanteaus have become a key part of the Korean language. So what would be an easy way for foreigners to learn and understand these words? For those who are new to Korean, learning and understanding portmanteaus can be challenging.
I think if you're learning in a formal environment, in a like 오학당, they're mainly teaching grammar from I guess textbooks which don't get updated that frequently. And I think there's no part of the course which covers slang and things like that. And I guess you just have to wait until you come across those words in your life and then find out what it is and get someone to explain to you.
Experts say the way the language is taught with a focus on formal standard words needs to change.
I wish that there's some sort of a book or like a website that people can use for these shortened words. Sometimes even Koreans, I'm Korean, but I go back into Korea, and sometimes I find these words that I just have no clue. So I think it will be quite useful. There's some sort of resources for non-Koreans, but also Koreans, to go to find out those meanings.
And through these efforts, the Korean language could become more widely spoken in the future. 송유진, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. The Hungarian government is to assume emergency powers to respond more quickly to challenges created by the war in Ukraine. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán announced the plans on Tuesday. He said while the world is on the edge of an economic crisis, Hungary needs to ensure that it protects families' financial security. He also said Hungary would stay out of the Ukraine conflict. The first set of measures are expected to be announced on Wednesday. Orbán won his fourth consecutive term in the country's April 3rd elections, but faces annual inflation of 9.5% and a surging budget deficit following a pre-election spending spree. In Rio de Janeiro, 11 people were shot dead during a police raid on Tuesday. Authorities say the raid in a poor neighborhood on the northern side of the Brazilian city was aimed at capturing the heads of a drug trafficking organization. Among the dead was a woman hit in the crossfire between gang members and police. The other dead are suspected gang members who resisted arrest and opened fire on law enforcement. The anti-drug trafficking operation targeted leaders of Rio's largest organized crime gang, the Comando Vermelho. Police seized assault rifles, pistols, and a grenade alongside cars and motorbikes used by the criminals. The World Food Programme has warned of an impending failure in food supply chains, partly caused by Russia's blockade of Ukrainian ports. Ukraine has been described as the world's breadbasket, but grain ships are unable to deliver their shipments from the conflict-stricken nation. Executive Director for the United Nations World Food Programme, David Beasley, said on Tuesday that a food crisis is already at hand. According to the director, even before the invasion, food costs, commodity prices, and shipping costs were doubling, tripling, or even quadrupling. Beasley also said the number of people, quote, marching to starvation has risen from 80 million to 276 million over the last 4 or 5 years. Turning to New York, where a hotel is debuting what it says is the first-of-its-kind non-fungible token reservation system, combining room stays and digital assets. Located in Soho, Manhattan, the Nomo Soho is starting by offering 300 guest rooms that are bundled with digital art assets, including pieces on display at the hotel. The NFT reservation system can be found on the hotel's webpage, while the service is facilitated by NFT marketplace OpenSea. 3-day packages start at 0.41 Ethereum or around $810 at current value. Longer 6-day packages, meanwhile, come close to 1 Ethereum or just under $2,000. A teenager in Nepal has been named as the world's shortest living teenager, measuring at 73.43 centimeters. At a function held by the Nepal Tourism Board, 17-year-old Dor Bahadur Kapangi received a Guinness World Record certificate on Tuesday. The record for the world's shortest man was originally set at 67.08 centimeters back in 2010 by fellow Nepalese Kakindra Thapa Magar, who died 2 years ago. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good morning. Yesterday we had a calm, hot and sunny day, but we will be seeing some rainfall today. Unstable air will cause 5 to 10 millimeters of passing rain in inland regions during the day. Then from tonight, we'll be seeing rain clouds approaching from the north, soaking upper parts of the country. It could be a loud night with thunder and lightning. Well, it was pretty warm again yesterday. In fact, Gyeongsan in Gyeongsang-Pukto province saw temperatures hiking to 35.1 degrees Celsius. Well, the heat stays today until the rain falls, but showers will cool things down at the end of the week. But it will be back to the warmer side again by the weekend. Now, morning temperatures are similar to the same time yesterday, mid to upper teens for most regions. Seoul starting out at about 17 degrees. Then highs will be 2 to 3 degrees lower than yesterday, but still very warm over in Daegu and Gwangju, going up to 32 and 31 degrees. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe. That wraps up our newscast for this hour, but we'll be back tomorrow for our Thursday's edition of New Day at Arirang.
Thanks for being with us, but stick around for more updates throughout the day. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and as always, take care.